I mean, there are a couple lessons that have informed our reporting ever since. One, give entrepreneurs who succeed less credit and give entrepreneurs who fail less blame, because there is so much random chance in the system. Yeah. And one of the grave mistakes that many an entrepreneur makes is they like succeed and thrive and they're like, I guess I'm smart about everything. You're like, no, actually you're not. Actually, like a bunch of that was random chance. And you worked very hard. Like I very often find that they absolutely put the work in, but there's so much luck to it. It all started with the Big Bang.
Exactly. I was going to talk about the Scotsman and how it had listings on the front.
Got it. Yeah, no, I mean, we can go deep. I think Kevin's doing especially great.
I just have to ask questions and listen.
Yeah.
You're usually on the other side.
It's true.
Yeah.
It is true.
Can I snap a pic of you guys real quick?
Yeah.
For the socials?
How do I look?
Oh, my hair's terrible. You look great.
I'm gonna get more coffee. Can I do that?
What does it take to grow a mission-driven business in Philly and keep it thriving while serving our community? Thriving, not just surviving. Hi, I'm Kevin Renton from Electric Kite, and today and currently I'm speaking with Chris Swink, co-founder and CEO of Technically. Founded in 2009, Technically is a journalistic network covering tech, entrepreneurship and innovation in Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, Pittsburgh and Delaware, delivering news, events and community engagement to technologists and innovation leaders. With 150,000 monthly unique visitors and close to 50,000 subscribers, if you live in one of these cities, you'll know exactly who Technically is. Welcome,
maybe.
Chris.
Who's to say? Thanks for having me.
Not at all. And I guess with that thing, a journalistic network in cities, I'm probably going to go wide and then we can narrow in. So my first question is what is journalism and why does geography matter?
Ooh, I like why does geography matter? So I have in a framed sign in my home office, there are photos of my children as well, but there's also a framed definition of journalism that I think about. Journalism is a strategy that uses storytelling and fact-finding to help a community reach a closer approximation to its truth. And that is even nerdier than it sounds, but the idea that like journalism is not writing articles, it's not putting out newspapers or magazines or blog posts or videos. It is storytelling, getting people stories, and getting facts, putting it together, and at our best, helping a group of people reach a better understanding of its truth. That's ultimately what it's about.
For someone not in journalism then, you mentioned truth. What is the process of getting to that truth and facts? What's it actually like working in a newsroom?
Well, that's a lot of great questions. So truth is having a moment in that we talk about it in lots of different ways. One of the things I worry about our moment is truth is bounded by the people that are describing that truth. Like actually, you'll go through you can go through journalism related philosophy coursework that's around like what do we call a color. That ultimately is like a bunch of people have to agree that this is the word we're going to use to describe that. We all know that's a little bit like an oversimplification. That's how we understand a complex thing. And you can describe that in journalism too. It depends on who's in the club. And if we break ourselves apart into lots of different clubs, then we can get really narrower sense of what truth is. And that's how we end up in a moment where we might say, what do you mean? I don't even agree with the facts on the ground that you're describing. Yeah. Because if we're part of like non-overlapping circles, our view of truth can get narrower to a group of people we are in and farther from a group of people who are not in. So that is a messy thing for a very pluralistic community or society. But ultimately, what we're supposed to do as journalists is talk to a bunch of people, put together a bunch of facts, and try our best to make a group of people think this is what we collectively think is true, which is why geography or any boundary matters. You're ultimately deciding who are we saying is in this club that we're ultimately listening to and serving.
So for you then, the geography, how does that impact that truth, or how does that impact the journey of creating that stories or those stories?
Yeah, so I identify as running a local news organization. We do it in a handful of cities and states, and growing now again. And it is, we talk differently about ideas in different places. That was once a strength of our semi-connected project of a country, in that you could have very narrow conversations and say, this is how we talk about it. And you could go somewhere else and see people talk about it differently. The internet does not like local at its very core. Our entire digital landscape is built, and we professionalize removing friction from every experience we can. That is, like, every website you've been on or project, everything is essentially about removing friction. But life is full of friction. Life is maybe the friction more than everything else. And so when you're trying to give a community a sense of identity or truth, it's supposed to be injecting friction in a world that does not like it. So by friction, I both mean the internet is great at incredible scale, right? Like, we have some of the biggest connections of humans in history because the internet has made that more possible than it ever would have been before. So global scale, or certainly national or any big scale, is really great, is done well on the internet. Saying I want to talk to a relatively small group of people is relatively expensive. We want to narrow our audience to talk to a smaller group of people. So geography matters a ton in the models. I think a lot about what are the models that sustain the information we get. And geography is a thornier one than you might think.
Yeah. It's funny because I will have grown up with a different landscape with journalism, because the UK is actually quite centralised. We have national newspapers, but of course in America you would have had Newswise, you would have had the Philadelphia Inquirer, Boston Globe, New York Times. What would the talent of journalists been like in those localized communities, and how has that been impacted with the centralization?
Yeah, I started my career 15 years ago in the wake of the Great Recession, so I kind of like came into the field after the nuclear winter, but I'm steeped in it, and this is work that I care about. So I'm familiar with how our trade got to where it is in some form. And so in the olden times, kind of before we fully fractured the like models, in the late 1980s, it wouldn't necessarily mean, if you were a reporter at any of those regional newspapers in Atlanta, Chicago, and Philadelphia, and Boston, it wouldn't necessarily mean that you were lesser than as a journalist compared to a reporter at the New York Times or the Washington Post. That was not quite how it would have felt. You could have been an influential reporter at any of those places. You were serving lots of people. The information models and landscape was very different. Now we kind of know that no matter where you are on any political scale, there's a kind of farm system in your head. You think, okay, local must be the minor league system. It's like minor league baseball. They must be the scrubs, and they must be trying to get up to the major leagues. That isn't how information provision was ever, right? Like our origins were very much like, there wasn't that kind of sense of things. They were just different. So I think that's one of the break points we had, that we've unfortunately created a culture and understanding that local is worse than in information provision. I believe that is making a reversal, but I think is one of the causes of our polarity and our crisis of this country, at least.
Cool. Let's take a step back then. You mentioned the 2008 crisis. I'm not sure people are sure the impact that had on journalism and the media, but it's almost the start of your journey into journalism, because you started technically in 2009. So tell us how you got into this, you personally, and what you were trying to do technically.
I recently played a counterfactual, because I left a plumber's apprenticeship to go finish Temple University, finish my undergrad. And so I leave that in maybe 2007 ish, and I go finish university, and I get a little fellowship after university, which is normally a very traditional path to like my prestigious journalism career. And it was very clear that I was a coyote running to the cliff, and there was nothing underneath me. Like, it was the end. That career pathway had already ended, and I just kept running toward the brick wall. So I finished this fellowship, and I have almost literally no job prospects. It's a Great Recession, which affects so many industries and so many people, but there was a simultaneous model collapse in how we got professionally verified information, especially at a local level. And so I went back to that plumber who I had an apprenticeship with, and I said, "Hey, how about that apprenticeship opening?" And he's like, "Bud, like, I can barely get work in this moment. You don't have a chance." And he actually later leaves the building trades, which actually mirrors the whole like collapse of housing that we've had. That in that moment, I was like inside that of like the building trades were collapsing. So then I couldn't even go back to the plumber's apprenticeship. I was like, I guess I'm doing the journalism thing. And a similarly desperately unemployed friend and I, two friends and I, start what became technically out of desperation, a kind of life raft in the stormy seas.
Yeah. So part of technically is working with innovators, entrepreneurs, technologists. How common do you think that story is, where people will go? I mean, I think there's two stories. There's the entrepreneur where it's deliberate decision making, and then there's the entrepreneur out of necessity. You see it all. How common do you think that is as journeys, and where was it different for you?
Well, and the economics literature explicitly calls it necessity entrepreneur. So like, there's now a distinction that we would have been categorized as a necessity entrepreneur, and there are two kinds. In the American system, some of our self-employment is a do-it-yourself welfare state. Like we've kind of left people to like, guess you better piece it together. And so that is a version of what our entrepreneurship is. That is some of our gig workers, that's some of our consulting practice, that's some just piecing it together. It's a very dire place. A thing that has changed in the last 5 years, very much a post-pandemic story, is rates of business incorporation have skyrocketed. So we were in a 30-year terminal decline in rates of entrepreneurship, business incorporation. Yep. The number of Americans starting a new thing from the 1970s to the eve of the pandemic was basically one chart going down, down, down with some dips around recessions getting worse. It pops in the pandemic era. Business starts surge. Initially, when we technically were doing this reporting and I was speaking to economists, initially there was a sense of like, this just must be all people trying to scam Paycheck Protection Program or whatever pandemic response. It must just be that, because we have no idea what's happening. We're 5 years in and business rates are still much higher than they were before. On the eve of the pandemic, there's a congressional hearing where an analyst we speak to pretty frequently told a subcommittee in Congress, millennials are on track to be the least entrepreneurial generation in American history. Doesn't matter if you were watching Shark Tank on ABC, we were starting few businesses, and it all changed. Pandemic fundamentally shifts, but what grows is this kind of necessity entrepreneur. We saw a whole class, disproportionately Black and Hispanic women starting businesses to try to fill childcare gap, elder care gaps. It was a kind of necessity entrepreneur. They're piecing together it. So there are bright lights in that. There is also a surge in high propensity businesses that were creating businesses that are more likely to employ. But like, we have shook how the American economy operates again. And technically, we do kind of mirror it. There was a necessity entrepreneur story. And then over time, when I got more options, I then started looking more like a calculated entrepreneur. And that is a kind of privilege that you can only do when you have options. And that's a different story.
Yeah. So you start technically 2009. What was the problem that you were trying to solve? What was the original vision?
I couldn't afford beer is like the initial problem. And like rent, truly, very truly was like, I was doing $50 blog posts and taking landscaping jobs and trying to take plumbing jobs. And I think we see this in the economics literature, like there's a very real scarring in people. Like I think I very truly have a kind of scarring of, oh, this isn't going to work out. I'm in trouble. Like I very much feel this deep, dark sense of I'm in trouble in that 2009 moment. So square one
Yeah.
was like, I gotta figure something out. Now, then, when we got outside of ourselves and said, we got to figure something out, my two friends and I just were like going literally with steno pads and pens to whatever events we could find that we were like loosely interested in this idea that a Silicon Valley thing was showing up in other cities and Philadelphia might have some of it too. And I think our guiding light, which we got right, was talk to people and listen to them enough.
Yeah.
And so in the hundreds of people we listened to, there was a lot of noise and some signal. And some of the signal was, this is in Philadelphia's case, but then other cities over time, this is a great place to live. There are structural reasons why this works well. Right now, you can buy low Philadelphia. There's a lot of cultural assets, and housing at that point was disproportionately low. We should buy in, and we want to grow the kinds of companies and the kinds of jobs we want to have here. So that was this kind of beautiful flourishing. As much as we were called like nerds or corporatists or whatever, I did view that early tech community of the early 2010s like a music scene that we saw in the 80s. And I think that I get teased about that, but I believe it.
I agree with you. I think people undervalue the impact of the music magazines in Liverpool when the Beatles came out. There is something about media, the magazine in the scene, that helps enable these entrepreneurs that are trying to create businesses. Whatever they're trying to create, they're still trying to create something. And to bring it to life and make those connections. That acceleration, I moved to Philadelphia, I want to say 2014, 2013. I get off a plane Tuesday night, Thursday night, I'm going to a Technically Philly event. And it's packed.
Mm-hmm.
Every startup founder person in Philadelphia at that meetup. And I met some great people. What was that journey like then in the 5 years to get to that point?
You're hitting on something that is taking place in different ways around the country sometimes. And so we technically, I identify us as kind of like, we represented a thing that was happening in a lot of regional cities. We were filling a particular gap. And then later we've identified as being a tool to help others do that sort of work. So, right, like we now in the jargon, this is entrepreneurial ecosystem building. But this idea that there's lots of like really interesting literature on the structural holes of innovation, how you get breakthrough ideas, and not like the dog walking app, but also how you do like breakthrough sciences that get to market. So the honest answer is we were very blind, very ignorant, but well-intentioned youngsters who were like listening to people, like interviews at over the phone and in coffee shops and at events, and hearing and trusting the people we thought were good faith actors. Not all of them were, but the people who we thought actually had a serious stewardship of a place and were doing interesting work that seemed at times serious to us. And so the journalistic act we were doing was talking to a lot of them and putting that into a narrative form and having a kind of collective dialogue with a community of, is this how we think about this? Yes or no? We were doing a lot of the event organizing then too. And now I think of that as a separate task that others are now well equipped to do. And I'm most interested in how communities think of themselves and how they get challenged. But that journey was convene the people, talk to the people, publish about the people, get feedback on that publishing, and repeat that work again.
Yeah. And I guess at that point, the local journalism just has a bigger advantage than the national journalism, because you're in the community. You're shaking hands, you're meeting people, you're having events. That human connection is still part of that journey. I want to ask a question then. With some of the startups or companies, innovators, what's some of the stories or the impact that you've had for them? Like, what do you think? Oh yeah, we wrote about this company and they went on this journey. Like, where did you see the impact it technically actually had on founders?
So 2 ways to answer that. 5 of those markets we're in, we've been reporting for more than 10 years. And in Philadelphia and Baltimore, it's coming on 20 years. We've gone to see a life cycle of a class of founder that starts with 1 and a half dozen in Philadelphia's case that had reached unicorn status. You can like that or not, but as a proxy metric for firms that have found enough of a commercial niche that they have been valued at over $1 billion by private markets, a couple of whom likely to have gone to go public, one that has gone public. And those aren't cherry picked. Those are intentionally examples of companies who I remember at the meetup, or I remember at interviewing them at a modest scale. So that full journey of we have an idea, get to scale. I mean, there are a couple lessons that have informed our reporting ever since. One, give entrepreneurs who succeed less credit and give entrepreneurs who fail less blame, because there is so much random chance in the system. Yeah. And one of the grave mistakes that many an entrepreneur makes is they like succeed and thrive and they're like, I guess I'm smart about everything. You're like, no, actually you're not. Actually, like a bunch of that was random chance. And you worked very hard. Like I very often find that they absolutely put the work in, but there's so much luck to it. So what did we do in those cases? We have lots of great like tactical anecdotes of both some of those company connections. Oh, investor meets company. I think the more profound ones for me are, we have lots of those like people anecdotes of, oh, I was living in XYZ neighborhood and I had no access or understanding that this was a part of like the job opportunities for me. And I got on the newsletter and there was like interesting people stories and they like followed the people and they understood the programs. And so we have those anecdotes of bumped into a technically story on social, got onto newsletter, followed along, went to a couple events, then went to a workforce development or an entrepreneurial access program, and then got into the game. Those are like much more profound as a tool for economic mobility. Yeah. Those are interesting. And then like journalism should be in conversation with a place. And that place can be the people who live there, the people who have some sort of democratically elected leadership there. And I have this really vivid memory of doing a piece with a very prominent, influential economic development leader here and a policymaker. Maybe it is around 2014, 2015. And we have actually a story where I really pushed this economic development leader about he had come to know me and he was always kind of a little bit indifferent. And to his credit, finally pushed me and said, your community couldn't fill 100,000 square feet in this region on a good day, or whatever kind of offhanded comment. And one, of course, it felt a little bit silly that your entire gauge for whether this matters is if you can fill commercial real estate. But fine, I'll take that bluff. And then we started assembling the square footage counts of these companies we covered, and lo and behold, they had reached that threshold. And that was an example of a narrative gap. The number didn't actually matter. That class of leaders perceived this as a kind of fringe thing. It's a bunch of either rich jerks or gamer dorks doing some stuff, not interested in this as part of our long-term strategy. And that has downturn implications. And we saw credibly our role as simplifying a narrative in a way that showed others outside of that community that this was something to believe in as much locally. And that's now what we've done in other places as well.
Question, you mentioned investors.
Yeah.
Your relationship with investors. Do investors contact you? I mean, you must have a unique insight into these ecosystems.
I like to think so. I also am familiar enough with the data that even among professional investors, the vast majority of them do absolutely nothing better than chance. So I don't pretend to have magic insight. I really love Philip Tetlock formerly of the University of Pennsylvania's research on experts are god-awful at making predictions about the future. Experts are worthless about the future. They're valuable for interpreting the past. Yep. And so expertise is not particularly great at guessing what's going to happen in the future. And that includes betting on companies. There's in the literature around investment, there's this idea of the top decile at best can outperform markets, but that might more have to do with kind of like market consolidation and the ability to like, once you're in my club, I can connect you to other people in my club and I'll almost guarantee success. So investors are not good at investing.
But it goes back to the music industry when, a record label would get 10 bands hoping that 2 bands would succeed.
Exactly right.
We're investing in 10 companies.
Exactly right.
We need 2 to succeed.
So then that, sure, we do get contacted by investors, and we've done for 10 years a curated list of early stage companies that our newsroom gathers. And I think one of the bets on our list from a newsroom that is like trained generally, but let's be real, these are not, we are not PhD computer scientists. It is a little bit about the vibes, is a community rallying around these people. So I think our fund, symbolically, of early stage companies that we've anointed over 10 years is a fund based on vibes. We've gotten some good picks. And I think that speaks to what we know from investing and the long tail, is that you are not good at making predictions about something you know well. So instead, we've learned to say you got to make a wide set of bets, and storytelling is really good at that. We make a lot of bets. We talk to a lot of people.
Yeah,
that's better than that's what we're better at.
Okay, I want to delve into the business model of journalism now. I'm going to geek out because I really enjoy it. I think most listeners probably don't know the impact that 2008 had on the business model on journalism. So we've gone from like a CPM model to someone that doesn't know. Cost per thousand, your adverts go onto a magazine or a website. Well, actually before that, it was really print. The money was going into print, and in 2008, there was a real shift onto online. But the CPM model then the business model doesn't work to be able to pay journalists. The cost of writing a story, getting a photographer, doing the fact checking, when you then get online and work out the cost per thousand, how many thousand views you have to get to a story, all of a sudden display adverts don't work.
Yep. I, as a rule, think we don't consider enough about the models that give us information.
Yeah.
There's the idea that humans are so reliant on story, we're like fish in water, which means we don't even really consider the quality of the water. It's so around us. And it's so all-consuming what ideas are entering our head and from where, people, information providers, what have you, we just awash in it. So yes, I've spent my entire career, I'm obsessed with the models that get us information. I think information and story is as important as our food source. This is how we interact with each other and navigate the world. And so I think it matters how those who provide us information get motivated. Professional information gathering in its modern sense gets its start hundreds of years ago only as a subscription model. Individuals who are gathering information for commerce or warfare and being paid to say, I will then get that information and inherit for you. So it was, in its origins, highly targeted, compensated for individual actors, that information was an advantage for business or war. And it's much later in 18th, 19th centuries that the idea of advertising was even added. That was like an invention, right? Like that I think a lot about, and we can find those examples. Philadelphia is actually a home to some of the early kind of versions of, we're going to put together advertising to bring down subscription costs and play with that model. But those are intentional business models that entrepreneurs were playing with. I take great inspiration from how you play with the models and what that gets you. And we go through eras in which we are highly motivated to be deeply partisan, and we get generations of information providers in the United States that are deeply partisan, and especially in the 19th century, because the models made that make sense. The rise of what we kind of fuzzily think of as a kind of golden age of 20th century American style information provision that is relatively low cost, relatively quality, though there's lots of gatekeepers. What happens there? Advertising was in such demand. The rise of consumer culture was the growth engine of advertising. And your options were like billboards or advertising in periodicals.
Yeah.
And that was a golden age. And so you then care a little bit less about subscription rates and you rely on advertising, and then you're kind of racing to the middle. And so we go to this moment, which has lots of flaws, but you race into the 20th century saying we want to amass the largest audiences we can. So we're going to kind of race to the middle because advertising is so valuable. Yep. That starts breaking down in the 80s and 90s because, as you said, the inventory essentially becomes ubiquitous. Because there was a time where, I can only have a dozen or maybe 5 newspapers in a given region. There was constraint. It was difficult to have a printing press. It was difficult. You were running a light manufacturing business. There was a lot of moat to entering that business. The digital age removed all moat. And media now is the inverse of most businesses. Most businesses, day one is the hardest. You got to figure out customer, you got to get that first customer, you got to figure out product market fit. Media is the exact opposite. Day one is the easiest. Anyone can launch a newsletter, open a website, launch a social account. You have incredible telecommunications tools to do that. Day one is the easiest day of a media business, which is why people get it wrong so often. 6 to 8 months later, maintaining, growing an audience, that's the hardest part of a media business. It's the inverse. And it's all powered by the models that get us there, which is very different in today's age.
So the advertising goes, the social media companies then come in, Google then comes in and takes away other sources of revenue. So where is the revenue now for local journalism? What models do you get? Is it content models? Is it jobs? What's the part that you see, hey, this is the revenue that I need to put next to the storyteller?
The kind of entrepreneur I admire, and there's lots that I don't, but the kind of entrepreneur I admire goes to the very basics of every business is supposed to solve a problem. That's it. Yeah. And we get away from that so often. It is like we become unmoored. And my trade of journalism has been tied to lots of different models. Like, journalism is not an industry. Journalism is an approach to the world. So journalism was a tool for an advertising industry.
Yeah.
Great. It worked pretty well for a while, relatively speaking. That was a strategy, journalism, that was attached to a particular business model. My interest is you can attach journalism to any number of business models. It's a strategy. So we see a flourishing of subscriber models, particularly at the national scale. Yeah. Like, I think the kind of Substack individual is a great thing. An individual with a bunch of tools can say, I am providing information to a particular narrow audience who will all give $20 a month or a year or whatever. And if I'm at enough of a national scale, I can make a great living. Local makes that very challenging. The model of local breaks on the internet because you're immediately narrowing down your audience. You start looking a lot more like a pizza shop, and you're running a pizza shop that people feel the pizza gets worse if they have to pay for it. That's a tough pizza shop to run.
Yeah.
So I think you have to attach your journalistic practice to other models. And so our first and longest running model focus was essentially an events model. You have talked about that. I think it's beautiful. And there's a lot of events models around the country that support information. I have concerns about those models, which is why I've moved from them. But it is one that works. We will gather news and information to aggregate an audience. We will invite that audience to a party. We will sell someone access to that party. That's great. And we still will always do a kind of event strategy, be it a conference of people, because I think that community is so very necessary in this work. But I always was worried about the indirect nature of that. If you followed that, I'm going to gather information to get an audience. I'm going to get that audience to come out, and then I'm going to sell access to the audience. You could sensibly say, well, why don't you not have the journalism part? Like, there are lots of ways to get information right now. I can do goofy TikToks and get people to come to a party. Why do this at all? So I think all the time about, if you replaced me with a PE guy, would you still have a newsroom? And in that model, you wouldn't.
Yeah. And the time that the events take.
Yes.
It's
It can make sense, but
it
yes.
would dominate your, I mean, it must have, when you were doing the events and you were running, it must have dominated your schedule.
Yes, so for sure. You become an events business because that is what you are. You're an events business.
Yeah.
Just like you were once an advertising business that uses journalism with it. And I think we need to engage with how we get our information and who does that. I think events models can be good because ultimately our newsroom's job was not maximizing audience. We were not an advertising model. Yeah. Their job, the newsroom's job, was to have relationships with people. So that is why an events model can work well, but it always felt indirect. So our model today technically has moved toward an underwriting model, which is like, in some sense, the most boring model there is. I convince people that our work of growing an audience around a particular narrative fulfills their goals. And so for us, that is a lot of economic development organizations. And I have those conversations of, oh, isn't that a problem? What if they don't want X, Y, or Z? I think that has always been the problem. Any model that has journalism as a front door will have a model, are you willing to stand up for the information that you're providing? Mm-hmm. That is less a question of the model, in my opinion, than the work you want to do. If you run a pizza shop, you can say, I'm going to use cheaper and cheaper ingredients.
Yeah.
That is, every business has that exact tension, and it's true in information provision as well.
Yeah. The future of journalism then, and talking about the future of journalism, I don't think you can get away from technology and AI. How do you think that that's going to impact you? I mean, do you ever see a moment in time where AI is actually writing your stories, AI is editing your stories, or is it going to impact us differently in the journalistic journey?
I take inspiration from photography's influence on art. We have that moment as photography blossoms where there's like a lot of journal writing that's like, I guess this is the end of painting because these machines can get a photorealistic image of a person. Why would they sit with me for hours for a portrait? And the narrative becomes, oh, what happens is impressionism happens. We kind of like zag as a people. We say, all right, I guess we don't necessarily have to do portrait. Instead, what happens is our art forms change. And if you do a portrait, you're signaling something else. You're signaling that I have the time or the money to do a portrait. It's a different thing. So as a rule, technology doesn't change the core needs we have as people. They change the expression of those needs. And so artificial intelligence, even if it's overhyped, which in my sense it is, like I in no way expect an AGI future in the next handful of years. I do not believe it. I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs and technologists who have sold me a lot of things over the years. And I think the hype is more than anything. But I already employ it in my journalistic practice. Of course it's going to be implemented. I do more map this to kind of internet age, which was meaningful. Like there were productivity gains once the systems caught up. It did impact society. So I believe all of that's true. Yeah. And I do expect that moment. So artificial intelligence already plays a role with information gathering. The question is going to be, what will we want from our information providers? I do worry that at our core, all of us want to be told that we are aggrieved, we are correct, and someone else is keeping us from our true success. That is like the tribalism that is coded on us. Mm-hmm. And so we desperately want information providers to tell us that. And we all now have access to the ability to be told we are aggrieved, we are right, and someone else is against us. That's very worrying to me because it's what we want.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, that company is doing it to us. We want that. So I believe we should care a lot about the models that inform us, and we should think critically about who is doing it and why. I think we all should want to be told things that annoy us sometimes. I think if we go through our day seeking frictionless experiences, we miss out on life and we get more unhinged from reality. So I think we want a trade of people. We don't have to use the word journalist, but some of us might, whose calling is supposed to be kind of annoying sometimes. Hey, this is a thing that may not comport to your existing worldview. Hey, this is a thing that might complicate your understanding of the world. We get a lot wrong, but that trade, I think, is deeply important for a free and open society. It's a kind of self-correcting mechanism, and we've collapsed it.
There's almost a case or a path where the trade or the people going out, truth-seeking and fact-seeking, creating this content becomes even more valuable as that then feeds into the AI models and that answers the questions. As the dependency comes onto the LLMs and you're answering your question rather than going to Google, where are the LLMs getting this information from? They're getting it from the trade.
Yes. In my particular trade of technology-oriented journalism, there's like this running joke of Uber spent $500 billion to make a taxi cab company, and Airbnb has spent $500 billion to make a hotel company, and the social platforms made $500 million more to make publications. One of the clearest failings we have in our understanding about how we get information right now is a false narrative that we removed the gatekeepers. 20th century American models information had a lot of problems with gatekeepers. That is true. But we traded one basket of gatekeepers for new gatekeepers. Every time you get on a social media platform, you are experiencing a gatekeeper. We just call it an algorithm and we hide the engineers in the back door, in the basement. But those are gatekeepers. They have to structurally make decisions about what information you'll be provided. That's what a newspaper editor was. We changed nothing about that. We've ripped out some of the professional standards. We crushed some of the models. And I'm a creative destruction guy. I read my Joseph Schumpeter. Creative destruction has its place. And my trade was deeply hubristic and blind to the systems. So unfortunately, there are barbarians in the gate, and the barbarians were right. And we are in the midst. So I often blame my trade first, that we had it coming, and we've now been exposed to the impacts of it.
So, future of journalism, the optimistic outlook. Where do we look for optimism?
I believe we seek out authentic stories about our world. The complexity. We are always trying to understand the noisy, overwhelming environment that moves faster than we can process on our own. Like, we use story to simplify systems that are too complex for us to ever understand. So we seek that out. We see bright lights. What we are right now calling creators or influencers are incredible. I see this whole class of creators that take information stewardship very seriously. I often find people on the platforms who wouldn't ever identify as journalists, but are clearly doing journalistic work. I actually think my trade needs to do more to say, hey, we actually have some solutions for the problems you're going to confront. You're going to get things wrong and need to know how to navigate that. You're going to have to pull something or not, and want to be able to have a transparent dialogue with your audience. Like, there's a whole mess of best practices that our trade has figured out over a few centuries. I want us to gather what is flourishing in how people are solving their information needs with a trade of best practices we can know. We will give high quality information out to communities. It's going to depend on how much we want to hear it.
Yeah. If you could go back to 2009 or speak to somebody wanting to get into journalism, what would you say to them?
Anyone who cares about independent information provision should love email. By which I mean, email. I'm aware that we're putting on this culture of email as boring and stressful and taxing. It is the only wide-scale distributed media platform we have. No one corporation owns your ability to download email addresses and bring it somewhere else. So, as nerdy as that is, it's like my honest answer. Like, that is free, distributed, independent platform. It's not owned by a publicly traded company. All hail email. Okay. So I would say defend the culture of email. Do not disparage email. It does not have a marketing department. which is why it gets clowned on. But it's the platform we want to distribute information because we can do it across communities. And so I would say, speak to the people you want to serve, do it as honestly and authentically as you can, and do it on a distributed media platform like electronic mail, and defend it for as long as you can.
Great. We're in Philadelphia. We've got some Philadelphia quickfire questions. On to the serious topics. Number 1, where would you recommend someone going for a cheesesteak?
So I'm gonna say a controversial answer in an unexpected way. I spent a year as a horse carriage driver in Old City, Philadelphia, and I had a running battle with a couple of the other drivers who were very passionate about their hole-in-the-wall steak shops. And we'd have these very lost tourists from very far away places asking for a cheesesteak, and they would be sending them to here's this deli in Nicetown's really got the best one, or like, have you ever been in Paladin Village? This has this incredible spot, or like over in Bridesburg is really where you want to go. And I'd be like, friends, that's not what these people are after. So I think you have to listen to your audience.
Yep.
If you're talking to people about their first steak, Pat's and Gino's is Philadelphia's Times Square, and deal with it, friends.
Yep.
And when you're first in New York from overseas, you go to Times Square. And when you're first there, you should go to Pat's and Gino's, and you should split it and just take your little photo. Yes. When you're at graduate course level, sure. Like I live in Fishtown.
Yep.
Joe's is great. It's a staple of my life. And I think that's what steaks represent for Philadelphia life, is that it is part of the fabric. This is not a big show. This is when, my kids and I are fighting and we need dinner right now, we can get a steak from Joe's. That is authentically and truly mine. That would be my answer for that. That is different than I got tourists in front of me and they need a show.
Totally. One of the things that I think is underrated with Philadelphia is, well, I don't think it's underrated living here, is the food scene in general. So non-cheesesteak, where are you going on date night?
Oh, well, so I live in Fishtown, and I have this running conversation with neighbors about what is good and what is good for the neighborhood and what is not. Yeah. My quick answer would be Murph's in Fishtown is a considerable reputation for Irish bar that then later added an incredible Italian chef. So it looks like a classic Irish almost dive bar, but they're have incredible pasta dishes. Great. And it's very important for me because I can remember as an early journalist, I did before they got incredible Italian chef, I was in the back of Murph's with whiskey and sources when it was more dive bar, and now it has world-class Italian pasta. So that dissonance is deeply representative of what I love about cities and what Philadelphia does best.
Cool. You decide to go back to being a tour guide. You've got some tourists here. What do you tell the tourists to go and see in Philadelphia?
So I still occasionally get asked to do tours more for the kind of comical nature of it. I think one of Philadelphia's strengths that we should reinforce to anyone visiting us for the first time is that our most visited areas are not in Epcot Center. My newsroom overlooks the Liberty Bell. I've done grocery shopping in Reading Terminal Market. I walk across Liberty Bell. These are not touristy places. They are part of the living, breathing part of our life as residents. I think that's the takeaway, that we still operate a city that is stewarding a kind of American history for all its complexity, but we still live there. It's not been stuck in amber with double-decker red buses going there alone. We live there. And that for me is the strength. That's what I want out of a city, that they keep remaining dynamic and fitful and ferocious, and Philadelphia is that.
Let's hope it stays like that. Thanks for your time.
For that. Thanks
Great
for the
to speak to
opportunity.
you, Chris.
Appreciate it.